just before we start the show, I want to take an opportunity to invite you to join me for the Podfluence Weekly newsletter, which is available both on LinkedIn and through the official newsletter channel. Now, if you are on LinkedIn and it's easier for you to follow there, then please just click on the link in the show notes, which will take you straight to Podfluence on LinkedIn, where you can subscribe for free and get weekly updates on Podfluence articles as well as episodes. If you would like to subscribe to the full newsletter where you'll get additional materials and, as my little incentive to you, my pre-podcast guest checklist for you to use when you're appearing on podcast shows so that you can be fully prepared every single time, then please click the link to the official newsletter in the show notes. Hope to see you there. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Loki Podcast with John Ball from Present Influence. We use Buzzsprout to upload and distribute the Loki Podcast to all major podcasting networks. If you're thinking of starting your own podcast, check out the link to Buzzsprout in the show notes. You could start your podcast today. On today's show, I am very happy to introduce a good friend of mine, someone I've known for some time and has agreed to come on my show, which I'm really pleased about because there's some important stuff that we want to talk about. Now, his business is online graphic design and website maintenance, but he is also the leader and host of one of the biggest meetup groups, I think, probably in London. It certainly is to do with entrepreneurs and marketing and the likes, called Entrepreneur Jam. And his name is Suraj Sodha. Welcome to the show, Suraj.
Thank you, John. It's so good to finally be on your show and be speaking with you about some important things that we're going to be talking about.
Indeed. And one thing that's really cool for this is that some of the stuff that first got me into understanding things like internet marketing and social media marketing particularly, I learned from you because that was something that you were teaching for a while, right?
It was, yeah. That's so lovely to hear. Thank you so much. And all of those concepts of internet marketing, which now go back, gosh, John, how long ago was that? It was many, many, many years ago.
Yes.
Whilst maybe the intricate details of it have changed, the overarching concepts are still so valid today. And I don't mean just in the internet marketing or marketing in general context, but in presentations and in running a business successfully and growing a successful business and how that fits into your lifestyle as well. So all of those concepts that I used to talk about from stage and in workshops that you know me from, they still apply to this day.
Now you have some pretty extensive experience in public speaking, and that's also a very good reason to be speaking to you on this podcast. But what led you there? How did you end up on this path? I know we met in the sort of personal development environment, training environment, but how did you end up on this particular trajectory?
So actually, it goes back to when I was in a corporate job. So if you sort of picture, 20, 21 years old, graduated from university, I'm in my first corporate job and, doing the whole suit and tie routine. And my boss, a chap called Peter, who still to this day is the inspiration or the spark that got me into public speaking, because, and this might sound a little bit weird, but I looked up to Peter so much, and I wanted to be him when I grew up. It was that kind of scenario. Mm-hmm. I was so impressed by my boss. I was kind of, I was such a big fan of his, and the reason was the way he held himself and the way he presented himself. So just without going into any detail, because it's extremely boring, I worked in corporate law, specifically in the gambling sector. So my boss was a world-renowned expert on the intricacies of gambling law, which is really not that exciting. But he was nevertheless an expert. He had written articles. He was featured on publications in the legal world and so what have you. But one of the things that just really sort of impressed me about him was the way he presented from stage, and he was constantly invited all over the globe to speak at gambling conferences, at legal seminars, and what have you about this particular topic. And that's actually where I learned about this concept of niche marketing and becoming an expert in one area of or becoming an expert in one field and really sort of becoming the expert there and being known as the expert in that area. And I remember seeing Peter on stage and the difference in the office. I was like, wow, he's able to like switch on and off between office Peter and stage Peter.
Mm.
And I was so impressed by that. Not from a not the angle that I was impressed with was more a case of the skill of being able to do that and being able to communicate the message he was wanting to communicate to the audience, and the aura that he had about him, the stage presence. And I was wowed. I was starstruck every time I saw this guy on stage, and was so humbled and felt privileged that I get to work with him every single day. And that's where it piqued my interest about public speaking. And I remember thinking to myself, well, when I grow up, and bear in mind I'm 22 at this stage, I was saying, when I grow up and I'm like Peter, I'm going to be speaking on stages all over the world, and I want to be sharing my message or whatever that message may be. And I had no idea I wouldn't end up staying in the legal profession. But that's where it started for me, long before you and I met, John, in the personal development world, which actually gave me, for want of a better phrase, my break in public speaking. That's where I first set foot on a stage with a real human audience, where people were looking at me. I had hundreds of eyeballs looking at me, waiting for me to say something clever or something inspiring or something that will change their lives. And that's where I got the first taste of public speaking, even though I knew I wanted to do it long before we met. And by the time that period of our lives, we were in that period of our lives, I had been out of the legal world for a number of years already. So I was inspired at the age of 21, 22 by my ex-boss, but it wasn't until maybe my mid-20s when I actually got to put it into practice.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting because just recently on one of my podcast episodes, I was talking with someone about who had inspired me in this area, and quite often it is the case that there's someone you've seen or been around or has some connection with who inspires people to go down this path. Not always, but often. And for me, it was someone we both know, Joanna Martin.
Yes.
And so the first time that I saw Joanna Martin on the stage, and this was a training. She was training, telling stories, and teaching us NLP from the platform. I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to train. I wanted to present. But it took me seeing someone like her doing it so well. And I'd say now she does it even better than she did then. We saw her maybe in some of her earlier presenting days, but now she's really blossomed into her own brand and her own thing, and it's amazing to see what she's doing, and I hope to have her as a guest sometime in the future as well. But for me, she was like a model, if you like, for going into that path and coming into the public speaking and recognizing what a profound impact and difference you can make to people from that kind of platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, similarly to yourself, she was a massive inspiration for me, or she is even a massive inspiration for me still. And I went through her training and courses and spent time at her events back in the day, where I was able to refine those skills that I was so inspired by from Peter, but also from the other events that you and I used to attend together and sort of volunteer at and be part of these events. Seeing some of those speakers, it was all well and good seeing them from the back of the room and from being a participant in all these various events, but actually learning almost the science behind it, the techniques behind it, and not in a shady way when I say techniques, but what is the best way to communicate your message. For me also, it was from Joanna Martin. So it's a great throwback.
At those events, there were so many Australians. I started speaking with an Australian accent for a while. I think.
I know, I know. It did seem to have a massive Aussie contingent at these events, didn't they?
It was, but that's not a bad thing.
Not at all.
I love my Aussie friends. For you then, you've done some of that training. You had some inspiration. You've done some speaker training. When did you actually first get up on a stage as a speaker to an audience that wasn't there to evaluate you or to help you with the training?
Yeah. So it was actually a workshop, a very small workshop that I ran in London, and it was around the topic of growing your business on the internet. What sort of strategies you should be implementing to make your website more visible and communicate your offer online in a better way to more people, ultimately to make more sales. And at that time, I didn't see myself as a speaker. I just saw myself as someone running a workshop. And
Mm,
whilst I was at the front of the room for 2 days running this workshop, presenting, speaking, helping people out, it wasn't until I was invited to speak at a quite a big sort of multi-speaker format event, which is when I first recognized that, oh wow, does this mean I'm a speaker now? So my first time where I wasn't I wasn't attending a workshop or speaker training was this little workshop, and I remember I think there was probably about 7 or 10 people in the room, and I think that really helped me because like I said, I didn't see myself as a speaker, but I practiced all of the same elements, the same techniques, the same concepts with lots and lots of small events like that. And by taking almost the stigma, not the stigma is probably the wrong word, John, but taking away the pressure of labeling myself as a speaker at small events, I think really helped me to then graduate, if you will, to the bigger events. And it was at one of my first big events. It was an internet marketing event in central London. I think there must have been about 1,000 people in the room. They had all paid to be there, and I was, I had massive imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I to speak
sure.
in front of all these people who've paid money to hear something clever, and I'm going to rock up and say something that I've been doing, you know, without really the level of success that I would have wanted before I could share this information. And I remember I got up on stage and I did my talk. And at the end of my talk, it was an hour and a half. Before I finished, I said, "Oh, by the way, this is my very first like major event that I've spoken at."
Right.
And the audience gave me a round of applause, and the feedback afterwards was like, well, we could never tell that this was the first event that you'd ever spoken at. And it was funny because I had treated that big multi-speaker event, 1,000 people in the room, as my first speaking gig.
Yeah.
And for me, even now, talking about it now, I still class that as my first time. But actually, when I think a bit deeper about it, it was all of those workshops all over the UK. And I used to get in my car. I drove to Bristol. I drove to Cardiff. I drove to Birmingham. I drove to Newcastle once, I remember, for like one night. And I live in London, so it's a long way to go. And I used to couch surf on people's sofas who I knew through various networks and events. And I said, hey, look, I'm running this workshop in Bristol. Can I crash on your couch? Because literally, I need to be in and out and back in London and all this. And that's where I got my training. And I kind of, it's really important for me when I do podcasts like this as well, to remember that that's actually where I learned my public speaking, by myself, by actually doing it and actually implementing everything I'd learned at these workshops and training events I'd been to. So by the time I did a big event, and then it went on to I spoke in Australia at one of my mentors' events, and by then I had um, I was able to draw on and take all the experiences from hundreds of small 10 to 15 to 20 person workshops and apply the same principles to 1,000 person workshop. And sometimes these people had paid upwards of $1,000 to be in the room. So it does have that added pressure of delivering something of real massive value. I guess that's almost a whole different conversation. But my training, if you want to call it that, came from the smaller events, which it's really easy to discount those as saying, well, I wasn't a speaker there only because there were 7 people in the room. It doesn't matter. That's where I learned speaking in front of people who had paid to be there and were waiting to be inspired or wanting some value.
I can remember attending one of your workshops, and I don't know how far along that was in your in your delivery of those things, but I remember it being a good workshop. So
thank you, John. I appreciate it.
That stayed with me. One thing that came up just from what you were saying there that I want to come back to was you mentioned the old devil of imposter syndrome. Now, I think everybody who ever does any kind of presentation or public speaking, anytime you have to get up in front of someone else, and sometimes even when you just showing up in a social or networking environment, it comes up. For you, when did you actually start to move out of that, or did you? Does it still stay with you?
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think it ever goes away, and it's one of those things that just keeps me. Of course, I can't speak for everyone, but certainly for myself, it just keeps me in check, John. It just keeps me grounded. It keeps my ego and my humility in check at the right levels, without crossing the boundary into believing that I know everything and I know it all, and I'm the greatest gift that this event is ever going to have, because nothing else matters apart from what I say. I like having imposter syndrome, and I try where possible to embrace it. It's super difficult because it still gives you those butterflies. It gives you that doubt. It gives you feelings of self-doubt and self-consciousness, and it does make you question yourself and think, what am I doing, and why am I here, what's going to happen if this goes wrong. And you do start that self chatter in your head that actually it puts you down. But rather than try and block all of that out, I try and anyway, and I'm not saying I'm an expert in it. Sometimes of course it gets you down, but I try and embrace that imposter syndrome, because it means that, hey, I'm not the smartest person in this room, and I'm here to learn as much as to give value. And by framing that up very early on, whenever I do a talk, it actually just settles me down. It settles the audience down. And also it kind of manages their expectations that, hang on, this guy is not going to be giving me the single magic bullet answer that I've been waiting for my whole life. He is, just like me. He's also on a journey, and perhaps he's just a little bit further along on that journey than I am, as if I was talking in the audience. And that's where I like to position myself, and not just for the audience, but for myself, John, because the minute I start to get a little bit too big for my own boots, I know that that's game over for me, because that's when my ego is taken over. And the minute I start to look down on my audience and say, well, obviously they're here to listen to me because I'm the clever one and they're not, that's sort of game over. So imposter syndrome is one of these things, I guess, which is it can really hurt your progress, but at the same time it can actually keep you in check as you progress and as you go through that journey. And for me, my benchmark is the minute I don't have imposter syndrome. Even talking on this podcast, John, I was sort of pacing for about 15 minutes before we jumped on this, thinking, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? I don't, who am I to talk about, presenting and influence? And, John's he's had so many more accomplished speakers than I am and I ever will be. So it kicks in, but here we are.
Sure.
And, it's one of those things, right? That if I know something a little bit better than you, I've done something, I've had more experience in something than you, that potentially qualifies me to talk about it and teach about it, and coming from a place of paying it forward rather than look how clever I am and look what I can do and look what I've thought up. Because quite frankly, and being totally honest, everything that I've taught, and I'm sure a lot of other speakers you have on your show will agree, that everything that we teach from a stage environment or a webinar or a podcast, I haven't made it up, John. And all these things, I've not made them up. I've learned them from other people. My role here as a speaker, as a trainer, as an educator, all of ours, is to simply pay forward what we've learned. And it may have been, we may take it from somewhere else and recycle it or rehash it and make it our own, and put our own spin on it and call it something different. But ultimately, I'm yet to find someone who has invented a concept that they've taught. It's all, for want of a better phrase, it's just rehashed information.
It is.
And I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's where my imposter syndrome kicks in all the time. But then I remember that, are you even expecting me to come up with a magic formula that you've never heard of before? Because
absolutely. No, of course not. Of course not. But we live in a postmodern world, and by that I mean that everything pretty much has already been done, but we still build on it, and we still take the principles and knowledge that other people have put together or provided us with, and we build on that as well. And so we take that hopefully a bit further. We put our different perspective or spin on it. I really like your spin on imposter syndrome, that you make it kind of a healthy thing. To me, it was reminding me of that, I don't know if you know much about Stoicism, but the whole thing of that the Roman emperors would have someone behind them saying memento mori, to remember that they were mortal, remember that they died too, that they're no better than their subjects and the people that they're speaking to. And it's that kind of thing as well, that keeping you humble, you remembering who you are. I really like that, and that's a very healthy frame. But all too often, that imposter syndrome just stops people from doing it. You talk about me having much better speakers on the show. It's like I would probably class you as being a better speaker than me. It's like all the time I'm speaking to people who are thinking, I'm just glad you've come on my show and you're going to have a conversation with me. But in no way am I thinking, oh yeah, let's compare you to other people I've had on. Because everybody has something unique to say. Like, this conversation is not a conversation I'm ever going to have with anyone else again before or after. So it is a unique conversation, and it is interesting as well. So thank you for that. But one thing I want to take us to this, I just want to ask you a quick question. What has been the most exciting stage you've ever spoken from? And I'm going to add to that, do you enjoy speaking now? And was that something that transitioned for you? Because most people start off afraid from it, hopefully end up starting enjoying it.
It's a great question. So the stage that the event that I was most excited to speak at, apart from my first one, which actually in hindsight I can now say I was excited about it. At the time, I wouldn't necessarily say I was excited. I was more anxious and nervous.
You're on the fence kind of level.
Yeah, one of those kind of situations. But the one I was most excited about was my very first international event. It was I'm trying to think how long ago it was. I can't even begin to think. Maybe 10 years ago, a long time ago. It was in Australia. It was on the Sunshine Coast, and I had literally reached out to the organizer and said, hey, I follow your stuff online, and I really like the information. I've implemented it. Here are my results from implementing it. What would it take to speak at one of your prestigious events to share what I've done? And I kind of pitched it from a point of view where I can come and big you up because I've implemented what you've taught me, and I can be like a walking, talking testimonial. And he replied, he said, I think you're ready. See you next month, ? And I literally fell off my chair. And I booked a flight out to Sydney, flew from Sydney I spent a bit of time in Sydney, then went to the Sunshine Coast, and spoke at this event. I think there were about 600-700 people there. They'd all paid a premium ticket to be there because of the person that was running it and the other speakers that were there. And I had the best time of my life. I hired there was no Airbnb back in the day, but the equivalent of an Airbnb apartment with a couple of other speakers that I knew through the network and just through the community. And we shared this apartment, and we sort of were living like students again. It was amazing, John. Yeah. And I was so excited to be there because I was one of the only Brits on the stage, and it was incredible. I felt in that moment, that was my quote, I made it, unquote, moment. And I still have a picture of me setting up my laptop at this event, literally 20-something-year-old kid, just going along with life. And I was so excited. I remember stepping back and thinking, hang on a minute, I've just, like a few years ago, I quit my boring corporate job in law to start this website business. And now I'm speaking in Australia, other side of the planet. Never been to Australia before. Like, it was one of the wildest dreams come true. And that was the most exciting and probably one of the most pivotal moments of my speaking career, if you want to call it that. And to follow on from that, your second question, do I still enjoy speaking? Was that your question?
Do you enjoy it now? Did you?
Yeah, I absolutely enjoy it, and my speaking has changed from that format of me being on stage delivering value in the sense of these are my 3 steps to so and so, or whatever I'm teaching. My speaking has changed, but I enjoy it immensely. And every time I get off a stage, and even if it's not a physical stage, even if I jump off a webinar or a podcast like this, I have such a rush of energy and that good feeling. I literally don't want to do anything else. And then I feel, wow, I want to do another one straight away. And it's, I guess, like the skydive. When you're about to jump, I don't know if you've ever done a skydive jump. I've done a few skydives, and
I haven't. I'm too scared.
it's one of the greatest things I've ever done. And it's the feeling of of that concept of you're up in the plane and the doors open in the plane, and you're thinking in your head, why is the door open in this airplane? That's not normal. And then why am I hanging out? Why am I stepping out of this open door in this flying airplane? This is not normal. And you're going through these emotions, and then you're in free fall to the earth, 200-300 miles an hour, and it's just so liberating and so freeing. And then when you land, every time I land, my parachute comes off, and I say, I want to do that again. I want to do it again. Let's go now. Let's do it again, all over again. And that's exactly how I feel every time I speak at an event, whether it's a digital or in-person event. I still love it so much. And I know I'm not a polished speaker. And I remember something that actually Joanna taught at her events. She goes, but actually your aim is not necessarily to become a polished speaker. She said your aim is to become a profitable speaker. And I've sort of adapted that a little bit, because I don't always sell from stage. In fact, most of my talks, I'm not selling directly from the stage. So for me, it's about being more of an authentic speaker. So rather than a polished speaker, I'd much rather be authentic and just be myself, and almost pretend like the audience isn't even there, that I'm just talking about stuff that I'm passionate about. And so, yeah, the answer to your question is, I do love it, and I get such a buzz, such a thrill from it. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't done it but wants to give it a go now through podcasts. This is the best form of public speaking, because we're speaking to the public without the pressure or the I guess intimidation of having 200 eyeballs staring back at you with their arms crossed, with sort of not very happy faces, waiting for you to inspire them. This way, I know I'm doing that, but it's without without the visual validation from people. But I'm still doing what makes me feel good, which is to give value, speak about things that I'm passionate about and that I love talking about, and so that the objective is still reached. So yeah, I love it more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that as well. Yeah, it's good, and I really liked what you shared there as well. And from perspective of just getting up on a stage and giving value, I think that's the more important thing. So often people will say to me, "Oh, I do often get a lot of feedback that I'm a good speaker." Like, okay, but hopefully I know that to some degree.
Yeah.
It's still nice to hear it from other people, just to get that external validation, right? You want. Yeah, although don't think it's only me who thinks I'm a great speaker, but sometimes you do still. There's always room for improvement.
Yes, of course.
We get too focused on the things we do wrong, and I think that can be one of the issues. I'm very active in Toastmasters, and sometimes I think that's one of the things that maybe puts people off, that is that when you get up and speak in a Toastmasters club, when you do a prepared speech anyway, you will get feedback, and you will get feedback on things like how many ums and ahs you put into presentation, for example, and that the polished speakers take that stuff out. Well, yes, to a degree, that's true. However, some of the best speakers I've ever seen in my life are full of ums and ahs. So it's not that it actually necessarily takes something away. If it's maybe too much, perhaps it would. But it's really more a case of just giving you that awareness that those things are in your speech. I now, I don't know, this is interesting, but I now transcribe the podcast. I wasn't doing it for a while, mostly as a time saver, but people are telling me it's important to do that. So I've been transcribing. And when I get the transcriptions back, the service is pretty good. I use like Otter AI.
Yes.
And you see all these places where you repeat yourself, where there's the stammers, natural stammers in your conversation, or where you say the same words over and over again that you don't notice. And really, in conversation, you tune it out anyway. But when you see it written down, it's glaringly obvious. And for a transcription, you have to clean that stuff up. But in conversation, it's probably not realistic that you're going to cut all that stuff out. So just have a conversation like you normally would. Otherwise, you end up being self-conscious about that and forgetting probably what it is you even really want to talk about, which is where you're going to freeze up and where you're going to get that brain fog or the I don't know what to say next, because you're not just there in the moment having that conversation. And one of the reasons why I call my business Present Influence is also that I love and play words of being present as well, of being in the moment, being actually there with your audience, not in your head thinking about what you're going to say next, or did you do enough preparation, or what kind of feedback are you going to get afterwards, which straight away takes you out of that. The more experience you get, you can be more relaxed, and that being relaxed in those environments does come with experience. That confidence comes with experience. That's one of the reasons why having a chat like this is generally a bit more relaxed. You know, we're recording it, we can cut stuff out if we need to, but we're not focusing too much on, am I saying the right things? Am I going to mess it up? What am I going to say next kind of thing? It's just a conversation.
Yeah, and it's funny how a lot of these things that we learn early on in speaker training school is for me anyway. I find that a lot of those things I then tend to kind of let go of, because I moved to a place of actually saying, all right, well, I'm not going to try and perform here. I'm just going to talk and have a conversation, and it comes much more from a place of authenticity rather than performance.
Yeah, I agree. And the authenticity is really the more important part there, actually hearing somebody talk as they would talk, not trying to give that polished performance. You know, I guess I had just recently a really good copywriting guy called John Asperian saying exactly this in his book, which I'm just about to finish, but talking about having people's copy that try and have it all polished and perfect, whereas it's actually much better for you to have copy that is how you speak, pretty much, because it's more relaxed, and it takes people a while to do that. And he makes a really good point, sort of plugging his book almost here, but he makes a really good point of that if you get into a meeting with some people and you talk like your copy, all polished and perfect, it's going to be a bit dull, and they're probably not going to buy for you unless you're really, really lucky. And it's true, you know, and so it is like the in-person, the connection stuff, the imperfect that makes us more relatable, and the lack of worry about that, and focus more on the connection and the value and the being in the moment that makes the bigger difference.
Exactly. I couldn't have put it better myself.
One thing that I really wanted to touch on with you,
yes.
I mean, you're a great person to follow on social media, I have to say. And probably that's how we've kept in touch mostly for the longest time, although we do from time to time have some connection. And I consider you to be an incredibly helpful person as well. Like, I remember you helped me get my first website set up, so I definitely appreciate that. I haven't forgotten that at all. But you also helped me out when I was looking for a cake topper for my wedding cake and things like that, which gave us the solution that we'd been looking for. I mean, just amazing. You're a very genuinely helpful person who wants to help other people. And so that to me makes you a great person to follow online. I know on LinkedIn you share a lot of value stuff, some humorous stuff, some interesting stuff. So anyone listening to this should definitely come and follow you on LinkedIn or anywhere else where you might want them to do that, because it's always good to follow people who are sharing good value.
Yes. And value is not just education, or I believe is not just here's how to do something. Value can be something funny. It can be a joke. Dare I say, it can be a funny cat video as well. Which you're going to see me post one of those later on today. But yeah, isn't that the point of social media? It's about connection, and putting our business owner hat on. Yeah, it's about providing value, and it's another form of letting people know about your personality. And if we met up and having a meal together or something, and all you talked about, let's put it in social media speak, all you gave me was value, I'd be bored out of my brains, John. Right? And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this concept of give value. I know I say that a lot myself, but it's one of these things that's been so overused, hasn't it? You give value first, and be value add and all this sort of stuff. How about just be normal and just share and pay it forward, and be a decent person, and that's really, like, I think what it comes down to. And if we focus on, right, this is a conversation and I'm going to give you value, it's already too robotic and it's already too overthought, because you would never do that in a real, quote unquote real social environment. We seem to do this on LinkedIn and all other social platforms, maybe somewhat too rehearsed. I think even me, and I hold my hands up to it. That's sometimes what goes through my mind. Okay, well, no more jokes today, Suraj. Put something of value out there that it's gonna change someone's life. And of course, there's never anything that I can post that will change someone's life. But it's interesting. But thank you for that. I really appreciate that. You enjoy my posts.
I hope this will impress you, but this is one of the things that I remember from your workshop all those years ago, talking about social media and saying that social media is social. It's social media. So if you're just posting about your business, if you're just posting about stuff that you're going to be doing, or your articles or whatever else, it is boring and it's not social. That you have to balance that with posts that might just be about what's coming up or what you're doing that day, or playing with the dog or the cat. But that's just as important, because it's giving people that sense of who you really are, and actually connecting with people on that personal level, that not just to project a personality, like your ideal Insta personality, but who you really are. And that's what people will connect with more than anything else. So I remember that from your workshop, and that stayed with me. I think it's advice I still give to people in terms of.
Thank you. That's so kind of you to say. And yeah, it is, and that advice still stands so true today, John. It's social media. It's not advertising. Advertising is very different to social media. And I know we have marketers have generally ruined social media, because these things were made for socializing and connecting with people. And in fact, Facebook was made for a very different reason, which would be completely unacceptable in this day and age if it was started as for the reason that it was originally started for. I don't know if you know, but Facebook was started for like a hot or not kind of platform to rate girls on campus, or to rate guys and girls on campus. What are you, are you a 10 or are you a 3? And can you imagine someone from the tech world in Harvard and Silicon Valley and all this starting a website like that in this day and age? It just wouldn't happen, right? But that's ultimately what these platforms were started for. Twitter was, just to share your thoughts. Snapchat, Instagram, all these things. This is invite people into your life who maybe are not going to be in your day-to-day life, but who want to be part of it. And we as business owners have ruined it totally, because all we want to do is give value, whatever that means. And all we want to do is show how clever we all are, and share all our information that we're just rehashing from other sources. And there is a place for that. I'm not being a total Grinch about it. There is a place for that, and I do it myself. But I think there has to be some degree of balance there about showing people what's going on in your life and letting them in and socializing, because ultimately the true test of a good business is that people buy from people. Just because you offer a service doesn't mean I will buy it just because you're posting about it all the time.
Yeah, I have a few Facebook friends who I kind of wish had their business profile separate from their personal profile.
Yeah, exactly. And isn't it the case that a lot of these times you kind of switch off after a little while, because you think, well, you're just trying to sell me something, and you're using this platform to advertise to me, and I still use that example of going to a party. If you were to go to a party or a social environment, drinks, someone's birthday drinks or whatever, and in the small talk, rather than going into, oh, how do you know so and so, or making all the usual small talk, you say, hey, do you want consultancy, or do you want a website? Do you need some coaching? They're going to look at you weird, and that you're going to look like a bit of a freak and a bit of a weirdo at this party trying to sell your services. But guess what? If you socialize with those people, you get to know them, you have a drink with them, or you have a nice meal and a nice conversation about things that you have in common, maybe. More often than not, they themselves will be more interested in saying, "Oh, hey, John, what would you do? I overheard you say something about coaching or consultancy or workshops and training. Tell me more about that." And all of a sudden, you're going into the topic of what you do, but without ramming it down someone's throat.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a whole webinar about networking, and I don't think I included that in there. I think I'm going to have to make some additions, because I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think that is really important. One thing that has been very interesting about following you on social media is you've had some very significant life changes over the years that I've been following you, and not least of which is a different direction of career to what I first knew you to be in, and you talked about some of that. But probably one of the most interesting, certainly one of the most inspiring to me personally, has been your physical transformation.
Yes.
And that you have gone from, I wouldn't have said you were really particularly big before, but you weren't slim either. No. Not going to, something I've struggled with myself in my life. But you have transformed into some super fit motherfucker now. He does all these, he does all these challenges. I want to know a bit more about that, what inspired it and what got you onto that journey, and what you have noticed different in your life because of doing this.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, John. So, like you said, I wasn't necessarily unhealthily overweight or anything. I couldn't necessarily take my shirt off at the beach and be massively proud about it. But I was early 30s, sort of it's chubby, but not quite. Not unhealthily chubby, but not fully happy with my appearance. But what triggered my full body transformation, from chubster to sort of being featured in Men's Health magazine, entirely sort of ripped and shredded to bits, was actually hitting a really low point in my life, and going from what you want to call cloud 9 to that rock bottom place where literally scraping yourself off the ground. And I was very happily married. I was doing good things. My business was great. I just sold one of my agencies for a big amount of money, and was looking forward to married bliss, house, a new house, babies, all the rest of the stuff that comes with that lifestyle. And long story short, my wife and I ended up separating and getting a divorce in a very short space of time. It was very much, roller coaster-esque period of my life. And I found myself, at the end of that year with no business, no wife, no baby that we were planning, no house that we were planning to buy, except for, a wad of cash in the bank account because I'd sold my agency earlier that year. So I had this massive void in my life in all areas. and I found myself really low, really stuck, no purpose in life, no real direction. And I was seeing a relationship coach at the time, and she said, look, just for starters, find yourself a hobby, do something you don't associate with your ex-wife. Go learn a language or something, and learn cooking, or do something, just something to take your mind off it and to disassociate from all of the feelings you're having. And I ended up finding the gym. I went to the gym, and again, massive sort of anxiety and not quite imposter syndrome, but almost like I'm so out of place here because I'm this chubby guy in all my brand new shiny gym kit, which I spent lots of money on, but I don't look like all these people in the gym who are wearing old rubbish gym kits, but they look amazing. And I'd kind of focus on the wrong thing. So I went into the gym, and I just kept going. I kept going. I created new habits in my life, created new habit systems to really focus on every single day, making sure I'm not in a bad way, but in a good way, ticking all the boxes I needed to tick to meet my habit systems that I was creating for myself. And before you know it, I started losing all of this weight, and it started to make me feel good. Not just because I could see myself getting leaner and fitter and slimmer, but actually from what you said earlier, some external validation from other people saying, "Oh, hey, Suraj, have you lost some weight?" And it might be really, I don't know if it's a polite thing to say to people anymore, or if it's PC, or saying, "Oh, you've lost loads of weight." But whatever the scenario around that is, it felt really, really, really good. And it drove me to say, well, yeah, and I want more people to say that to me. So I'm going to go to the gym even more, and I'm going to hit it even harder. And then I got a trainer who basically I explained my situation to, and I said, I need you to take me to my extreme. I need you to push me to my extreme, like really take me to a place that I can't take myself. And so we went into this full-blown body transformation program, which included overhaul of my nutrition and really understanding my nutrients and my macros that I needed to eat to sustain my body and my fitness and my strength, as well as a gym routine. And over a period of 12 to 18 months, I basically lost, I think, 25 to 30 kilograms of weight, got totally ripped, got this amazing physique that was like magazine level physique, and was able to sort of dig myself out of that hole that I'd essentially found myself in. So and one thing my trainer talks about a lot is this concept of the physical is simply the vehicle. So it's actually not about the muscles or the body or the physique or the look and the aesthetic of it. Don't get me wrong, it helps. It looks great, it feels great, it gives you a massive confidence boost. When you look in the mirror and you look good and you feel good and the clothes fit better and all of this. But the much more the more important benefits and the important transformation is what you don't see, which is the mental transformation, the mindset transformation, and how that kind of permeates into all areas of your life. And I found that the habit systems and the discipline and all the awareness and the consciousness that I created in order to achieve this insane physical transformation, it was the very same things that I had to apply in my business to achieve a business transformation. You still need the same level of discipline, the same habit systems, the same level of consistency, whether you're publishing a podcast or a blog or making cold calls. The same concept applies to getting a breakthrough there, as well as a breakthrough in the gym. If you're aiming to lift 100 kg dead weight, for example, it's about those small steps and small consistent steps, or as my coach says, ruthless consistency, almost at all costs. And if you apply that in all these areas of your life, your body, your being, your spirit, your spirituality, your balance, which is your relationships with a significant other or family and friends, and then your business, there's no reason or there's no logic as to why you can't have a transformation in any of those sort of areas of your life that are important to you. So it very much was a case of a distraction from what I was feeling at the time, but it turned into this enormous passion that I've found. Awoken this newfound passion for health and wellness and training and going to the gym, and I ended up loving it so much. So yeah, that's that story. And you've seen the pictures, John. You've seen the case study, and yeah, it was an incredible journey, one which had actually and ironically has nothing to do with my body.
Right. But I mean, I can only sort of go from a perspective of what I imagine here, because, you know, I wouldn't describe myself as being the fittest of people, although for me, within the last 6 months, I've lost something like, I think I'm going to try and say, I think it's something like 25 kilograms, which is amazing. Bad, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
But there's still a way to go. And but, you know, I've taken inspiration from you, from your journey, to see that you've made such a huge transformation. I wouldn't say I'm going for that level of transformation myself, but certainly to get that it does start to change how you see the world when how the world sees you starts to change as well.
Totally. And unfortunately, that it can also make you realize, you know, sometimes how shallow the world sees things, or how shallow the views of certain people are, or certain parts of the world are, which is not something necessary to be proud of, but it's certainly something to be aware of and be more conscious about. But from a positive point of view, absolutely, it makes you feel good, because you know then you're inspiring other people. And the amount of messages that I had to say, well, do you know what, I've also had this problem, and not just from like people wanting to lose weight, but actually people going through similar life situations that I was, you know, going through mental health challenges, going through depression, going through relationship problems. And I'm by no means an expert in any of those areas, certainly not relationships or mental health, but the impact that it had on me, it kind of inspired others to take a different step or a different view. And not everyone wants to or needs to go through such an extreme program like I did, but it really does change the way that you feel and the way you look at yourself when others are looking at you in a more inspiring way. And it impacts everything. It impacts your business. It impacts your well-being, your mindset. It impacts your ideas, your creativity, everything around you.
And we maybe come back a bit to the imposter syndrome we mentioned earlier. You know, I know one of the that sometimes I've even had getting up on stage as well, is that, you know, people are, as soon as you get up in front of people, people are making judgments about you, whether fairly or unfairly they are. And, you know, if your weight isn't within what people consider to be the ideal range, then, you know, people are making judgments about you. Look like you're too skinny, or if you look like you're too big. That's the first thing people are noticing about you, and are making a judgment about, that either you don't eat enough, or you eat too much, or that you don't have self-control. You know that that's what's in people's heads. You don't want it to be, and it's unavoidable. But then you kind of almost can end up getting a bit obsessed about that that's all people see. But it does change, because we all know that when you actually start to get to know someone a bit, you start to see them for who they are more than what they look like. And that is the bigger part of it. But you're right, for the most part, the world is pretty superficial. And you know, I know, not just from insecurity, but I know that there have been opportunities that I may have missed out on because I didn't look as healthy as I could look, didn't look as slim as they would have wanted me to look for those opportunities. And is that something you relate to at all? Do you get that? Do you feel that there's a difference between who not just was obviously different physical transformation, but that there were things maybe you missed out on, or insecurities that were particularly coming up for you at that time?
Yeah, it's hard to say, you know, if I missed specific opportunities, because you know, nobody would tell me that that's the reason I would not be put forward for something. But I could definitely feel it, and I almost like created those limitations on the opportunities that I would then try and go for myself. So, nobody ever said to me, well, you're a bit chubby, so maybe this is not the right thing for you or anything like that. But I started doing that to myself, and that's how I kind of restricted opportunities inadvertently for myself. And a lot of these things, did involve public speaking and did involve applying to speak at certain events, because you look again using the what we talked about earlier about the world being quite superficial and shallow. We are also part of that world, and we are also the same human beings that we're referring to, that are looking at a world in a slightly superficial way. We all do it. And I remember being in, I think I was in Austria, attending a industry event, so a website, a web developers seminar, and it was it's the biggest in Europe, and they put out a call for speakers, and I like, well, I know my stuff. I've built a web agency for coming up to a decade. I've got all the experience. I've got more experience than most of these speakers here combined, and I've got real value to add. But I was in Europe. I was looking at speakers from Italy and from France, from Spain, from Germany, all over all Europe and all over the world, and feeling conscious that I was not. I didn't fit the visual of these speakers on these big stages. These guys are quite, they're all tall, they're all quite fit, they look good wearing these cool suits, and I couldn't pull that off because when I wear a suit, it doesn't quite sit right on me or whatever. So the physical appearance definitely impacted me, and maybe I maybe it wouldn't have made any difference if I'd applied to speak at these events and I'd got the gig. It wouldn't have made any difference. And I don't for one second think they would have looked at my picture and said, well, he's a fatty, so let's not have him. But it impacts the decisions that we make for ourselves. So yeah, I definitely felt those insecurities. And even now, like, a year on from this transformation, where I'm at a stage of maintaining my weight and my muscle, and maintaining it at a level that is more sustainable and you can live with it on a day-to-day basis, is also a challenge in itself, because now I know whenever I get onto a podcast or people read a blog about this transformation, all they imagine me looking like is this Men's Health cover ripped guy. Like, it looks like this all year round, which is not the case. If I post something on Instagram, for example, one of the insecurities that goes through my mind is, hang on, people have seen me with my shirt off, looking absolutely, like ripped to pieces. But this image doesn't show me in that same light anymore because it's been a year, and my goals are different. I can't stay at that same level all year round. So what will people think? Will people think I kind of faked it, or it was photoshopped, or So you still go through those insecurities, and I don't think there's anyone who is totally entirely comfortable with the way they look and the way that they're going to be perceived by their friends, family, clients, colleagues, what have you. I don't think that ever goes, but it's about managing the expectations that you have of yourself and of those looking at your content online.
We all have our insecurities about something or other, and
yeah,
about things that other people don't notice. Now, I know we're sort of running some time here, and I hope you're okay, because there's a few things I want to.
That's fine.
So let me know if you need to. If we need to wrap things up. But one thing I did want to get onto is that there's something you've been doing. You've been running a very successful meetup group for quite some time. Yeah. And I think if I remember rightly, it started off as a meetup for marketing, but it's really now become more of an entrepreneurial meetup. So I'd like to ask you a bit more about that and what it is you do, and what that has done for the people who attend it.
Yeah. So I've spent, a bit over a decade building my online businesses, having a good degree of success with those businesses, and I got to a stage in my life, John, where I felt, and it sounds a bit cheesy, it sounds really corny, but I really felt this sort of duty, like a duty or a responsibility to pay forward and to share the things that I've learned along the way. Now, you can say, well, I've been doing that for 10 years anyway, through events and workshops and blogs and podcasts and what have you. But actually, coming from a very different place of let's create a community of other people who are at different stages of their entrepreneurial journey, and they simply want to learn from others with no, there's no ulterior motive. There's no, I'm not doing it to raise a profile or to build a brand or anything like that at all. It's coming from a place of this sense of responsibility that I've had a taste of this success, and I have to give it away. I have to pay it forward, because that's how I got it myself. The only reason I had the successes and the failures that I had was because other people paid it forward to me, knowingly or unknowingly, whether they were teaching me, directly, or I was reading a book of theirs, or I was reading their blog or watching their videos. Right. And I felt this deep sense of duty that, as entrepreneurs, we owe it to. This makes me sound really old, but we owe it to like the next generation of entrepreneurs who are learning the ropes themselves, and we can shortcut their success very quickly by just telling them or shining a light on something that they may not see themselves for another 5 years, simply because they just won't get to that stage in their journey until they've had a few failures and successes themselves. So I think whether or not they take it on board, whether or not they implement it, even if they ignore it, we have a duty to give it away and to pay it forward and to give that heads up to those who need it. Because if it wasn't for others doing that for me over the last decade, I wouldn't have learned what I know, and I wouldn't have had anything to share and to reshare to my audience. So that's what Entrepreneur Jam is. It's a community of like-minded entrepreneurs and speakers who just want to give stuff away because they're passionate about it, and they're kind of past the point in their business and their lives where they need to speak at an event in order to sell something, or they're a little bit past that phase in their lives where they're doing it to raise their profile. We've had some incredible speakers, people who are, we had the founder of Cobra Beer last January, Lord Karan Bilamoria. We've had other lords. We've had people with MBEs, people who've had massive impact in business and entrepreneurship in this country and abroad, but are not looking to sell a course or an ebook or a workshop or anything like that, or raise their brand, because Lord Bilamoria, I don't think I can raise a Lord's brand any more than he already has, right? And he doesn't need me to do that. And the concept came about where I was speaking to these people, and I remember having a call with a guy who is a real expert in time management and getting more done in less amount of time. And I told someone, I've got this call with this guy, and it's going to be super exciting because he talks about how you can, achieve so much more in less time and all this stuff. And they said, "Oh, will you let me know what he says?" And this is going back a year or 2 years. And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll give you a call afterwards." And of course, I forgot to give this person a call. Or when we did eventually speak a few weeks later, I'd kind of forgotten what we talked about in this chat with this guy I was talking about. And he said, "Oh, did you not record it, as a podcast or something?" And I said, "Well, no, not really. I wasn't really into that, and podcasts weren't really a thing a couple of years ago as much as they are now." So he said, "Well, I bet you there'll be 50 people who would love to be a fly on the wall on that conversation, or to that conversation." And I said, "That's interesting. How could we do that?" And that's how the live events were created. And the concept of the live event is like a talk show. It's not a presentation. There's no slideshows or anything like that. There's no speaker doing a stand-up presentation. It's me interviewing somebody else, just like you and I are doing here, but in front of a live audience. And I joke about it at the events. It's like it's like the Oprah Winfrey show. I'm Oprah, where I sort of get the crowd going. I call in this expert and I interview them in front of the crowd, and we kind of forget that the audience is there. It's just me and the other person having a conversation about things that I want to learn from them. It just so happens that there's 100 people sitting in front of us also learning from them. So it's a concept of come and watch me learn from these experts. And I guess that's also the concept of a podcast, right? So it's almost like a live it's a live interview with experts who are just sharing information, and I love doing it. And so that's what I was talking about before when I said my public speaking has changed very much from what it used to be on stage delivering a presentation to now almost being an interviewer and just facilitating other people delivering value and me learning at the same time. So it's kind of I'm killing a lot of birds with that one stone. I'm helping other people to learn. I'm paying forward the things that I know, and I'm facilitating these super successful individuals who also feel this sense of responsibility of sharing the information they know.
If anyone listening is in or around the London area and wanted to check that out, where would they need to find information?
So the best place is one of two places, either on meetup.com, which is where the meetup is hosted. You can find it there. You just need to type in Entrepreneur Jam. And the other place is on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Entrepreneur Jam. You just search for it in Facebook and you'll find all the pages and the groups for it there. And that's where obviously I'll share the new events that are coming. Do want to go digital with it as well and bring it into the current age of podcasts and be able to reach more people. Of course, with everything that's going on right now, a little bit difficult to bring 100 people together in a small confined space. But I'd love for anyone listening to this to come down and get involved.
So people can get in touch with you through Meetup and find out more about Entrepreneur Jam. Is there anywhere else where people can come and find out more about you?
Yeah, so the hub of all of my stuff, whether it's the Entrepreneur Jam meetup, whether it's my businesses and the services that I offer, and all of my content that I'm starting to publish about my advice and my tips and things that I've learned along the way, is my website, which is www.surajsodha.com, and that's where you can. That's where I'm going to be publishing and spending most of my time. And from there, of course, you've got my social media profiles. It's just my name. There's not many people called Suraj Sodha in the world. So if you search me on any of the main platforms, you'll find me. And I'd love to connect with people and just learn about what you're doing. And if there's anything I can share with other people, then absolutely send it my way.
We'll make sure that all goes in the show notes for sure. Yeah, that's a privilege I don't have of having a name that I don't share with too many other people, because there's plenty of people or variations on the thing.
Yeah.
It's a little unfortunate sometimes, but memorable in other ways. So one thing then, as we start to wrap up, I like to ask my guests for a book recommendation, and it may not necessarily be to relate to anything we talked about, but maybe relating to something that you have found personally useful, a book that you would always recommend, or maybe even give to a client or a friend. What would that book be?
So I've spent the last few months just really diving deep into a number of books, but there's one book, it stands the test of time for me. I have been giving this book away probably for the best part of 7 to 8 years. I give away so many copies every year, I literally have no idea. It was actually a book recommended to me, John, by a mutual contact of ours, Dwayne Alley in Australia, about 7 or 8 years ago, who told me about this book. It's called The Go-Giver. It's by a guy called Bob Berg and John David Mann, and it's written as a fable. It's ultra simple, simple and easy book to read. It's not a textbook kind of business book. It's not a how-to business book. It's just written as a fable, and that book impacted me so much when I read it 8 years ago. I literally reached out to the author after I'd read it. I think I pretty much read it in one sitting and said, I need to spend some time with you. I need to come to your conference, your event, whatever. And he happened to be having an event in Florida a few months later, which I flew out for. And it was the contents of this book just impacted the way I run my business and elements of my life as well. The book talks about 5 stratospheric laws of success, and I won't go into them now. I don't want to ruin it or do them injustice, but the book talks about these 5 laws of success that are universal, that will allow us as individuals to grow a business or to just to live a better, more wholesome life. And I cannot recommend it enough. I give these books away at my events as well. Every now and then, if I'm talking about something, if I did this at the last event, which was last year now, which normally it's a monthly event, but last year when we had one of our end of year events, I think I had about 50, 60 people in the room, and I said, like, this book, I referenced this book as part of my interview with somebody, and I said, if anyone wants this book, I believe in this message so much, just email me your address and I'll get a copy sent out to you. And it's that important to me that more and more people read this book, especially those who I work with. And of course, there are hundreds of incredible life-changing books that I've read as well. But if I had to read one, which is not like a typical business book, it would be that one, The Go-Giver.
It's a great book. I remember Dwayne sending out that recommendation, and I bought it based on his recommendation also, and I love it. Just a few weeks ago, I recommended it to one of my clients as a book for him to read as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it is a book that I would second that. It's a great book for anybody to read. So thank you for that. Let's close up the podcast then with a final thought. Maybe I should have asked you to prepare for this.
Put me on the spot now.
Well, but just a final thought, maybe a bit of your own personal philosophy or some action that you would want people to take, or maybe even something that relates to stuff that's going on right now, but just a closing thought to leave everyone with.
I think lead with an authentic reason why you're doing things. If you're launching a podcast, if you're launching a blog, if you're launching a service or product or a course or an event, whatever it might be, we hear about people saying, make sure you know your why, your purpose, your ultimate end goal. I think we need to add just a word in front of that, which is authentic or authenticity. It's all well and good saying my why is to change the world or my why is to do so and so. Rather than that why coming out of an exercise of some sort where you've got a big piece of paper and you're writing out everything that you want to get out of your brain, just make it authentic. And it doesn't have to be a life-changing mission or a world-changing mission that you're on to, impact every human being on the planet. It as long as it comes from a place of authenticity and integrity, anything can work. Anything you can if your thing is about making money right now in wherever you are in your life right now, and you just need to make more money, that's totally fine. But do it with integrity and do it offering an authentic solution to someone's problem. And if your thing is about curing something or solving other people's problems, as long as it comes from a place of doing it out of integrity and authenticity, I think you're onto a good thing. So that would be my closing thought. There's too many people doing things inauthentically and with the lack of integrity. And on social media, like we talked about earlier, it's very easy to spot those people. So if you're the person sharing and giving authentically and with integrity, it's actually easier for you to stand out that way, and you don't have to work as hard either.
Yeah, that's great. And these are things I hear business owners and entrepreneurs talking about more and more, operating within ethical frameworks, operating from a place of authenticity and service. And it's a good conversation to hear, and one that I hope continues to spread, especially through the corporate world, really, as well, where it's very needed. So that's a great thought to close up on, and we will close with that. Suraj, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. You've been a fantastic guest. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to be on your show. I'm so glad we got to do this, and I can't wait to see more of how we can help other people and do more things together like this.
Excellent. Thank you, Suraj.
Thanks.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please make sure to like and subscribe and come back for more great episodes and chats with amazing people. If you think you'd be a good guest for the podcast, or you know someone who would, or you think I'd be a good guest for your podcast, please feel free to get in touch. You can email me, john@presentinfluence.com. If you think I'd be a good speaker for your event, or you'd like to learn more about public speaking, presentation skills, whether that's online or in person, creating online products and services, video content, having clarity, confidence, and charisma in all of doing that, then please shoot me an email or visit my website, presentinfluence.com, and I'll see you there.